Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at the JN Financial Center in Kingston for the first in a three-part series of conversations entitled Beyond Breast Cancer, as we kick off the JN Power of Pink campaigns for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This afternoon, we are joined by an esteemed panel of persons who will discuss a variety of issues that affect the quality of life of people, both men and women, living with breast cancer, their families, and their friends. And yes, you heard me correctly, I did say and men, because though women are more susceptible to this disease, men are not immune. And today we're going to be tackling several major issues as it relates to empowering Jamaicans to take action against breast cancer. Last year, 974 women were diagnosed with breast cancer in Jamaica, and this may increase in 2020 to a number of 1,000, according to the World Health Organization, and may further increase to approximately 1,300 by 2040. Cancer can ruin lives, but we don't have to allow it. We can rise above it and move beyond it. To start our conversation this afternoon is a combination of people who have studied cancer or have experienced it in one way or another. To my immediate left is Dr. Beverly Wright, Director, Health System Support and Monitoring Unit in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Welcome. Mrs. Hewlett Gordon, to her left, who is the Executive Director at the Jamaica Cancer Society. Mrs. Carolyn Graham, Chairman, Jamaica Reach to Recovery. We also have with us Dr. Andre Williams, to my right, who is an integrative oncologist from Teshuva Wellness, who's joining us all the way from Montego Bay. Welcome. Senator Dr. Sapphire Longmore, who is a consultant psychiatrist and a breast cancer survivor. Greetings, survivor sister. Mrs. Janice Longmore, Chief Operations JN Bank, and Dr. Damian Friend, who is a senior manager at JN Life Insurance. I am Kamala McQuinney, breast cancer survivor and associate clinical psychologist. Now, we're going to start off asking our colleague from the Ministry of Health and Wellness and from Jamaica Cancer Society and Dr. Williams to help us paint a picture of what the data is saying locally as it relates to breast cancer diagnosis. Where are we likely to be in another 10 years? And also, can we look at some of the trends in terms of the ages? Are we looking at younger ages being diagnosed with breast cancer from year to year? And also, how are these things, as the data speaks, impacting how we deliver healthcare here in Jamaica? I'm going to start with Dr. Wright because she's right beside me.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting the Ministry of Health and Wellness to participate in this conversation. The incidence of breast cancer is increasing worldwide, and according to 2018 Globocan estimates, new cases of cancer in Jamaican women, 25.3% is due to breast cancer. And for the total population, breast cancer is second only to prostate cancer, accounting for 13.3% of new cases as opposed to 17.8% due to prostate cancer. As a developing country, we are fully aware of the impact of cancer and other non-communicable diseases on our population, and with our international partners have done significantly in our estimation over the last 5 years. We have developed a national cancer plan and are vigorously implementing this plan. Some specific achievements are, everybody knows about the Jamaica Moves program. It focuses on exercise, a healthy diet, and getting your health checks. And we are happy to know that JN is a partner in this significant move. We have also established a national cancer registry because, as you are aware, we are using estimates from around the world, and we do not have currently local information which we could use for planning and research. We have also increased access to chemotherapy drugs and treatment services, increased access to radiotherapy treatment services at our 2 national cancer treatment centers in Montego Bay and Kingston, where we have state-of-the-art equipment. We are currently finalizing the local guidelines for the screening of cancers, including breast cancer, and are developing treatment guidelines for cancers, including breast cancer. Yesterday, the Honorable Dr. Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness, officially launched the Enhancing Healthcare Service Delivery Project, which will increase access to screening and diagnosis of cancer, including breast cancer, through radiology and histopathology support, outsourcing, and building capacity within our facilities. There are future developments. I am happy to see our colleague oncologists in integrative medicine, because we are hoping to establish cancer treatment centers of excellence in Jamaica that will provide comprehensive and integrated care for persons, including breast cancer. In early 2020, we'll be opening the radiation medicine facility at the University of the West Indies, and we'll continue to strengthen the relationship with local and international partners, including local NGOs, and to increase access and quality of care.
Thank you so much for those comments. Can I just jump over to Mrs. Gordon to give us a feedback in terms of, in your experience, what are some of the trends that we're seeing?
Sure. Thank you. And as always, the Jamaica Cancer Society is very happy to be a part of any discussion around cancer, and in particular, cancer prevention. In Jamaica, it is estimated that 1 in 21 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer, which is the leading cancer and the leading cause of cancer-related deaths among Jamaican women, affecting most in their productive years. Approximately 60% of the breast cancer cases diagnosed in Jamaica are among women between the ages of 25 years and 59 years, which tends to mean that it is a more aggressive form of breast cancer. The Ministry of Health and Wellness have already shared the global statistics that we are currently using, and breast cancer stood at, that's the number of new breast cancer cases, 974, which accounted for 13.3% of all new cancer cases. The mortality figures for breast cancer for the same period stood at 413. The majority of cancer cases diagnosed in Jamaica are locally advanced or metastatic at presentation. This is primarily because of the low level of compliance to screening. We face many barriers to screening, and the most, the major one is fear. Fear of doing the tests, fear of the outcome of the test, fear of treatment, and fear of treatment-related adverse effects. Of course, there are the socio-economic challenges that we all face as a population. To treat cancer is extremely expensive and is prohibitive for so many Jamaicans who do not have access to health insurance to address the financial burden that is associated with a cancer diagnosis. In 2018, the Jamaica Cancer Society provided 7,191 women with mammography screening. With its mobile mammography unit out of service, the Jamaica Cancer Society has moved ahead to forge partnerships with private radiology centers across the island, transporting vulnerable women from those underserved communities to these centers and paying for their mammography screening. The Society provided small grants totaling $4 million in 2018 to vulnerable and underserved individuals to access cancer treatment. Now that, as you can well appreciate, is a significant investment by any charitable organization. The Jamaica Cancer Society remains focused on primary and secondary prevention. We continue to lobby the government to enforce the existing tobacco laws and to enact comprehensive tobacco legislation to address tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. Through sustained public education, we continue to influence health-seeking behaviors of those in our population, stressing the importance of physical activity, eating healthy meals, abstaining from smoking and harmful use of alcohol, and of course, getting regular screening tests done to detect abnormalities before they progress to cancer. As it relates to the management of breast cancer, we continue to stress the importance of monthly breast self-examinations, clinical examinations, and annual mammograms as key strategies to detecting breast cancer in its early stages. Early detection delivers on the best outcome for cancer patients, and it saves the family's purse. Globally, significant progress has been made in cancer research to identify risk factors that promote the development of cancer. There are new and improved targeted treatment options, with more new drugs being placed in clinical trials. However, despite the significant progress made, cancer remains a major health challenge. We need to place greater emphasis on cancer survivorship and quality of life. We need to establish more support groups like Jamaica Reach Recovery, and in more recent times, the Brothers United Against Prostate Cancer, so that those faced with cancer can have access to the emotional, psychological, and spiritual support that is needed in battling a disease such as cancer.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Gordon. So many key points were raised in your expressions just now, and I'm going to head over to Dr. Williams, who is the integrative oncologist among us, to kind of guide us in the discussion of, I heard key points about prevention and not just treatment being raised. Yeah. What are some of the ways in which this data and the developments thus far are impacting on development of delivery of healthcare?
Thank you. I find that certainly my colleagues have already made very good points about what needs to be done and the state of cancer, particularly breast cancer in Jamaica. What I wanted to emphasize is that our current situation is not unique to Jamaica. In 2016, for example, I had the privilege of meeting at an international congress in Chicago, where doctors from various so-called developing countries were invited to sit at a table and make contributions about innovative strategies that could be used. And it was an eye-opener. What I learned from that Congress, first of all, was that we're not unique, certainly. Developing countries in general, because of the lack of financial resources, are having problems with cancer as a major non-communicable disease. And also I realized that the more innovative we can become is the more we can see different strategies take root and begin to change the narrative on cancer in our country. Because the reality is that, as Ms. Gordon pointed out, we really don't have the financial resources to sustain some of the treatment strategies that are being recommended. The other thing to point out is that the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, in light of that, has actually released new guidelines. They're called harmonized guidelines that apply to the Caribbean region, because they've realized that it's not technically feasible to sustain some of the targeted therapies, for example, and some of the more expensive therapies that are readily available in so-called first world countries. So I think we need to start looking at creating our own networks, our own policy guidelines, and strengthening the existing ones so we can change the situation that presently obtains.
Thank you so much for those key points. I just wanted to highlight, as we move on to the next segment, some of the points raised by our colleagues thus far. What jumped out at me was that 60% of diagnoses made are in women between the ages of 25 years and 59 years. That is young. 25 is young. And I feel as though so many persons sometimes associate breast cancer with a 55-year-old, 60-year-old woman. And so it's important to highlight to those of you who are watching that screening is important as early as, in my estimation, and Dr. Longmore and Dr. Williams can guide me, as soon as you have mammary glands, as soon as your mammary glands are developed. It's important to form some kind of a, vigilance over what's happening in the breast tissue, because younger and younger women are being diagnosed.
And also to add to that, that in Jamaica, through a recent survey done between the Jamaica Cancer Society and the University of the West Indies, we have found that the median age for women diagnosed with breast cancer in Jamaica is that of 52 years, which is
still
8 years younger than the global average of 60 years.
Excellent
So
point.
the whole importance of education is you know, we can't overemphasize that.
Absolutely.
And to start having the dialogue with our young women and men at the university level.
Absolutely.
Or maybe even earlier. You know, and also that although family history and genetics play an important role, Dr. Cornwall revealed recently that up to 80% of the breast cancer cases in Jamaica had no family history at all. So although you have these major risk factors over the years, things are changing.
Absolutely.
And it calls for greater vigilance.
Absolutely, I so agree. And just to further personalize the conversation in cementing the point, I was diagnosed at age 30. And so many people saw me walking into the oncologist's office and they were like, why are you here? I'm here for treatment for breast cancer. And so it's important for us to become aware, and I'm grateful for JN for pointing out these very salient points in this conversation, that younger and younger women need to become more vigilant. So we're going to now move on to the support systems available locally for the treatment of breast cancer. And I'm coming to my very esteemed colleague, Mrs. Carolyn Graham, who is the chairwoman of Jamaica Reach to Recovery. Can you give us a little bit of information as to what Jamaica Reach to Recovery does?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Jamaica Reach to Recovery is the breast cancer support arm of the Jamaica Cancer Society. We have been around for 42 years, so we've really been on the road for some time. We provide support in all its forms, whether it's moral support, emotional support, psychological support. We provide information for the families because breast cancer doesn't only affect the survivor.
Yes.
It affects the whole family.
Yes.
So you need to provide information so people know what they're getting into. And basically what we do is, having gone down this road and had the experiences, we share our experiences. So that persons who have been recently diagnosed, for example, come in and visit with us. We meet every month.
Yes.
So they visit our meetings, and it's important for them to look around at the meeting and see persons who have been there, done that,
Yes.
and look normal.
And are thriving, yes.
Because the truth is that once you're diagnosed, the first thing you think is, oh my Lord, you know, it's a death sentence. But if you're able to see other persons who have been there, and you're reassured that if they've done it, I can do it too.
Absolutely.
So it's really a peer support group. We also do financial support because, as has been mentioned before, breast cancer can make a family bankrupt.
Yes, easily.
I'm happy to hear that the ministry is now stepping up a little further on that road. But I mean, there are persons who come to us and they're looking at expenses of $2 million. Who has $2 million sitting down to do treatment? You know, and then you wonder, what happens next? How can we help? It's a frustrating experience.
Yes.
And a lot of persons who come to us are sometimes at the stage where we really can't do very much for them. But we can hold their hands, we can reassure them that there is life down the road. And basically we really are just a simple support group. We help you, we help your family, we take you as far as we can.
Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so important to highlight the fact that breast cancer diagnosis does not only affect the individual who's diagnosed, but the entire unit.
Entire family.
And especially in my capacity as associate clinical psychologist, informally and formally, people reach out to me as a survivor to share their stories. And sometimes I hear some heartrending stories, for example, of a woman diagnosed and mastectomy is recommended by her physicians, and maybe her partner, her romantic partner, is not for removal of the breast because he likes her breasts. And so even the education, you know, to let people know that this is a life-saving treatment that is available, part of the whole treatment protocols, that can actually, and in many cases, does save lives and prevent recurrence. So it's so important for the entire unit who is affected to access services through the Jamaica Reach to Recovery and become more in tune with the information, and to also benefit from the support, because it can be a very taxing thing to give support to someone who's battling breast cancer. And on that note, I'm jumping over to Dr. Safari Longmore to help us to walk through the state of mind, the psychological, maybe the psychiatric and emotional needs that do come up for someone who is in the middle or the end or the beginning of cancer treatment.
Thank you, Kamala. And again, my sister survivor.
Yes, please.
And thank you, JN, for inviting me to be a part of this very important discussion. And I think it's very relevant at this time in Jamaica's history, where I think we are at a point where these issues are becoming more recognized as being solvable and not just running and, oh my gosh, I have a cancer diagnosis and that's the end of my life. Let me just state that I don't plan on being just a cancer survivor. I plan to be a cancer thriver. And that is my state of mind from I was picking up that I did have a cancer diagnosis to deal with. I just wanted to quickly recap a little bit in terms of the age groups affected, and just to recognize the fact that the ages of 25 to 59 are the most productive age of women in our society. Not just productive in terms of economics, but in terms of the family unit that they tend to be the heads of. Even if there is a male in the family, the female plays a particular role that no one can substitute. And when something like cancer rears its head in that family unit, every single member is affected. And if we lose that critical person in that woman, it is not just a loss of a woman, but it's a loss of a family structure and a survival capacity of every member of that family. And so it is really very critical that the screening that we hear of, I for one, it's not because of fear. I was just too busy to remember that I had to go and get screened. And that is my message to persons who lead this very active lifestyle, that I, with my background of being a medical doctor, being trained, telling people to go and get screened, was not doing it myself because my life was so very busy and I did not find the time to prioritize myself in that way. And that is one of the messages that I have to say to our women, that no matter what you're doing, find the time to take care of you also. Now, with respect to the support that is needed, you mentioned, and I do agree, and I've broken it down into 3 aspects. Before or during screening, before diagnosis, whilst you are diagnosed and possibly dealing with a diagnosis, and after, because there's a huge impact after you have probably gone through a treatment process. And what happens, the slightest ache you have, you think it's the cancer coming back. And so this need for psychological support, it transcends all 3 dimensions. There needs to be that level of community thinking when the person is being diagnosed, especially if they have a family history of cancer in their family, not necessarily breast cancer. And the men are sometimes wondering, okay, my sister had breast cancer, what should I be doing? My mother had breast cancer, what should I be doing? And men don't go do mammograms. If the breast tissue is large enough, you can do a mammogram. If not, you can do your self-examinations. You can do a breast ultrasound. Just go and see your doctor and be guided by what needs to happen if you're a male who has this high risk in your family. And recognize that the screening has to happen in somebody earlier in their lifetime if they have a family history.
Absolutely.
So whereas your diagnosis was at 30, a close family member should probably start screening from they were 18 or so, yes? Now, the ultimate prevention, in my mind, is preparation. The ultimate prevention is preparation. And when I say preparation, I mean preparation of the mind, of the body, and of the spirit. No matter what else is going on, if our spiritual health is not good, we can't cope with anything else. We have to get our minds in a frame where we have the support, we have the social networks that we might need to get through this very tough process. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and speak your business to everyone. It just means that you're able to access even one companion when you need that person. Get your mind and your body also in the way of preparation in terms of your diet, your exercise, your screening methods, etc., etc. And your spiritual health. Know that there is a force and a power that is greater than you that you may be able to call upon, and that also is reinforced when you call upon your community to help you in that fight. Lastly, I have an adage that we all know: when life gives you limes, you make lemonade, but you also share it.
Love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Longmore. Yes, Dr. Williams would like to weigh in here as well.
I just wanted to add also, as we talk about the emotional, there's also a widening chasm for the patients that are diagnosed in terms of deciding which so-called treatment pathway to follow. Because what's happening now, not just in Jamaica, but across the world, is there's a wide spectrum, or there's a disconnect between the so-called conventional treatments and the so-called alternative treatments, both of which are bashing the other and suggesting that the other is foolishness and don't do it and the other is harmful. I think there needs to be a kind of discussion like this amongst practitioners of all kinds, so that women can have a better understanding, so they're not polarized to deciding that, okay, I must go conventional or I must go so-called alternative, so that there's a greater level of understanding between the different practitioners. And we, as Jamaica Cancer Society has pointed out, prevention and some of the strategies that we use in terms of weight modification, nutrition, and so on is direly missing from our discussion in terms of cancer treatment in the most cases. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. It's the elephant in the room, really. Because a woman who has been diagnosed now thinks, okay, mommy wants me to do chemo. Daddy said chemo is bad. What do I do? And that adds to the emotional burden.
Absolutely, I so agree.
And Dr. Williams, if I may add to that, the reality in our society is that the affordability is what oftentimes makes that decision. A lot of persons would want to go for the conventional and the quote-unquote medical treatment, but they're not able to afford such, so they then seek the alternatives. And if you're not quite savvy with how to go about that, you may end up worsening.
If you can just hear from Dr. Wright, and if I may preempt her by saying I'm so grateful that the decision was taken to rename the ministry to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, because I believe that wellness is in many ways a huge preventative approach.
We are indeed focusing on individuals' responsibility to integrate and balance all aspects of their health, and certainly the social and emotional well-being of a patient is important, and it is shown here that the support groups are very important. This integrative treatment modality is definitely being considered in our cancer treatment centers of excellence. As you have been exposed to this, Doc, in developed countries, such as even our next door neighbor, the United States of America, both traditional and the newer methods are integrated, and that is where we hope to go. And just for the record, Jamaica, the Ministry of Health and Wellness does provide care free of cost to patients, and on top of that, we also provide additional support through the Compassionate Fund. It's just that some persons are not aware of how to go about it. So if somebody is a survivor and has used these avenues of care, then you can then help somebody else to access this care.
Excellent. And we're coming to the part where we discuss the financial burden of cancer. But before we get there, Dr.
I
Longmore.
just wanted to add, you mentioned in terms of the psychological support that is needed. I think what we're seeing happening right here in this moment, right now, where yourself and myself, who are both survivors, we are actually changing the face of cancer. We're actually demonstrating that it is something that is manageable, it is something that can be overcome, and your life goes on. But you just need to pay attention to it and not fear and not shy away from a problem. And I think that is probably the most significant effort that can be made in terms of enhancing someone who has to go and do that screening, someone who has been diagnosed, or someone who's actually.
I love that point, and I was coming right to that from our initial segment where we spoke about, I think it was Mrs. Gordon who mentioned the barriers to screening, which are in many ways psychological, because I have a former co-worker who said to me, post-diagnosis, she said to me, boy, if you didn't know what you know, you wouldn't even go trouble it. Because in many Jamaican people's
Just
mind,
leave it alone.
if you don't look is not real.
Yes.
Yeah? And they feel as though you better close your eye as opposed to go jumping into,
Yes.
And so I didn't even have a response to her because in my mind that is absolute madness. And so I implore all of you who are watching to please abort.
Yes, and to add to what you're saying as well, there is an emerging trend where everyone now is becoming a doctor with access to the internet. So, okay, I feel alone, right? And in the absence of proper and accurate information, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to say, oh, what is this? And Google says X. And we're there, we're trying all these recommendations by Dr. Google,
Yes.
while at the same time, the cancer is progressing. And that is also adding to the issues we're having with late detection.
Diagnosis, absolutely.
Yes.
And can I also just jump on that point, and maybe Dr. Williams might feel a little bit like I came for him as the representative here of the medical community in oncology in particular. There have been some troubling experiences related to me of younger women in particular who have presented to their physicians with a lump, and some doctors telling them that, you know, man, you look young, it's not likely that it's cancer, while putting off the very objective tests which should be done at screens. And so I've heard horror stories of women who their treatment was delayed and therefore their recovery compromised because of people telling them, no, your face don't match this cancer thing, it's probably like something else. And so it's important for people to balance the whole seeking of information on your own, because Google, it can be damaging in the wrong hands, but it's also so important for us to, in many ways, also kind of hold our physicians accountable in many ways, because there have been several instances of people getting wrong information and of people, the treatment just not being managed in a very professional way. So it's important for us to balance all angles in my mind. And we cannot in any way conclude this conversation without looking at the financial burden of treating with cancer and even the cost associated with screening. And so I'm going to now invite our colleagues from Jamaica JN Life Insurance and from the JN Group to speak to us a little bit on what are some of the costs generally facing someone who has been diagnosed, and what role can institutions like JN play in such situations. Let me start off with the lady, Mrs. Longmore. Please guide us.
Thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very educating experience. I really appreciate being here. I'm speaking today not just as a staff member of JN Bank and JN Group, but also as a daughter of a survivor, as the friend of survivors, and also as the niece of a survivor who survived breast cancer for 58 years before she died.
Wonderful.
And it wasn't cancer that killed her, she died at 90. So she was diagnosed and had her mastectomy when she was 32 years old. So from my experience, some of the financial issues that I've seen with people with breast cancer is, one, financial is huge. I once employed somebody who was 32 years old, a very professional, bright young lady. She was a cancer survivor and almost didn't qualify for the job because she couldn't get health insurance being a cancer survivor. That's one of the, it shocked me when it happened. I was much younger then, and I didn't know that if you are a former cancer survivor, you couldn't get health insurance as a part of the group health package. That's very important because she needed to do screening far more often than somebody who had never experienced cancer. I think that's something that we need to look at. How can we include survivors in group insurance packages? Also, as I was sitting here listening to my esteemed colleagues talk about cancer, it also occurred to me that one of the statistics that we often quote in Jamaica is that less than 10% of us belong to a pension plan. What that tells me is less than 10% of us probably are under a group health scheme. And that's very important. What that means is that if I get a breast cancer diagnosis, I can't afford the drugs, I can't afford the doctors, I can't afford the even the scans, the screening that I need to properly detect and know where the cancer is. I can't afford a psychologist, I can't afford a psychiatrist. I go to reach for recovery, probably at a very late stage. That's something that I think is important to know. And I think I heard the lady from the Ministry of Health and Wellness talk about us needing to, well, what you're doing now to include more people in terms of providing support and financial help. I think that as a country, we also need to look at all of those people who are not covered and how we can further help. The NHF, I believe, is wonderful. I have high blood pressure, and it helps with that. And there are drugs that are covered under the NHF.
For cancer.
Have been a lifesaver for
Yes.
people and also for JADEC. So life insurance, being a part of a group health scheme, helping people also being covered who have already been diagnosed and gone through cancer. And I can also speak as a friend. This has nothing to do with highfalutin banking or financial services, but I was with my friend when she had her surgery, and she had 2 children, a husband that wasn't working, and I said to her while she was in the hospital, who's going to take care of you when you get out? And she didn't know. We can help by doing simple things, like for instance, paying for somebody to help a friend.
Yes.
And people, we have pride, so maybe we don't want to ask for help, but you're going to need a helper after surgery. You probably need some kind of nursing support. And as a friend, if you can offer that too, because those are things that people who are going through the walk after cancer and treatment, these are needs that are real.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding those very, very powerful points, because sometimes we think of only the medical, the medication, the chemo, the radiation as being real costs. But in my experience, there are some women, for example, who have challenges even in paying their bus fare to move from where they may live in Maypen to come to KPH for treatment. And sometimes the treatment does render people drowsy. Some of the medications, you may feel sleepy afterwards. Sometimes having a companion and being able to pay for them for the day to travel and to have something to eat to come could be a deterrent. And so it's so important for all of us to become helping hands on on this road of treatment. And I'm going to jump to Dr. Friend, the friend of all, to speak to us a little bit about how institutions like JN Life Insurance or JN Insurance could possibly be of benefit to persons who may be battling cancer.
Thank you so much for having me. And I always enjoy being a part of conversations like this. And I listened as we all spoke. And the reality, I've been in the insurance industry for just over 2 decades. And so I've had to deal with many such cases. In my other life, I'm a clinical psychologist. And so I deal with it from the other end and the family issues. And as was said, the costs are significant. The medical costs to take care of the person, to get the person through the necessary treatments, etc., can be exorbitant for the average Jamaican family. And very often that cost is not just for the individual, it ends up being the family. I have seen persons not only grapple with the costs of taking care of the health needs, but whilst they're ill and trying to get better, the house, for example, goes on auction because they had to make a choice between paying the mortgage and trying to get better. We've seen future generations get put back several years because what was supposed to be the education fund for the children gets eaten up in this sort of thing. As we talk about even the support, we recognize that, for example, if you're going to see a psychologist, Jamaica, like several other countries, it doesn't get covered on your health card.
Absolutely.
Right? So unless you're seeing a psychiatrist, then there's no help there. So even if you have a health card, then
it's out of pocket.
It's out of pocket. And all of these costs add up. Now, how does life insurance help? Life insurance offers critical illness insurance. And that is something that too many persons have not yet realized the big difference. Because what this does for you is that you're able, for a few cents on the dollar compared to what the payout is, you're able to have yourself protected so that if it is you get diagnosed with a critical illness, in this case cancer, then you will get paid a lump sum. Now that lump sum can be as low as $1 million, it can be as high as 30 million, etc., depending on what type of policy you take out. Now, what that lump sum does, it offers you a lot of financial freedom. Because when we speak of, for example, deciding which treatment modality to use, if it is not conventional, usually the health insurance will not cover it. Yes, if it is one of those that would be considered cutting edge, it doesn't matter how good it is, until it has been in mainstream for a certain time, it's not going to be covered by your health insurance. So even if you have your health insurance, it would not help. The good thing with critical illness insurance payout is that the payment is to you and not to the medical facility. And so therefore you are able to use the funds as you see necessary. Now the funds can be used to take care of your medical expenses, but it can also be used to take care of some of those loans that you probably need to pay out and be able to have peace of mind. We know for a fact that if stress is high, cancer tends to progress faster. Yes, it can take care of these other costs. It can ensure that what you have been building for your retirement, what you've been building for the education fund for your children, it remains intact. You will not have to trouble it because the insurance company pays out. And on average in Jamaica for critical illness insurance, we pay out within 48 to 72 hours once it is you've provided all of the necessary documents. JN Life certainly tries to pay out within 48 hours. Now, also, if I speak to JN Life in particular, we have taken it farther because all the critical illness insurance plans available in Jamaica are what we call critical illness plans of first instance. So like it is with health insurance, with critical illness insurance, once you've had a critical illness, you are unable to get critical illness insurance again. You become uninsurable for critical illness. You become uninsurable for critical illness insurance. Now, what happens is that with plans of first instance, once you've been diagnosed with a critical illness, it pays out the full amount, but it ends. Now, with persons being diagnosed early, persons having illnesses early, and we spoke of the breast cancer incidents, we find that the median age is some 8 years younger in Jamaica than the global average. With persons being diagnosed earlier with a critical illness, then the likelihood of being uninsured and therefore having to self-insure for the rest of their life is great. And we think of Mrs. Longmore's, was it your aunt?
No, my friend. The person that I employed.
Right, whom she got diagnosed at 32 and lived until 90. Now,
oh, that's
not your aunt.
Now, of course, what we find is that being diagnosed earlier, you run the risk because there are certain things, including cancer, that you will sometimes find that there is recurrence. Yes, it might not be the same one, the same type or same location, but then it is not unusual to have cancer again. You know, like some of the other critical illnesses. Now, what JN Life did was to look and realize that gap. And we have brought to market, we are the only company currently in Jamaica that has a critical illness insurance plan that pays for reoccurrences.
Really?
And so if it is, you've been diagnosed with a critical illness, we pay out the full amount you were covered for. Let's say you were covered for $6 million, we pay out the $6 million. So your money, take care of yourself, do what you need to do. If it is, the illness recurs, then we pay out the full amount again. All you have to do is continue paying your premiums, and there only needs to be a minimum of a year between diagnoses.
That's excellent.
Not only that, we do it also for additional occurrences, meaning a separate critical illness, because we've also found that based on how the body works, very often having had one critical illness, you become more likely to have something else, because the body had to go through all of those challenges dealing with that illness. And in that case, we say the waiting period is not even a year, it's 6 months. And there's no upper limit to the number of times you can claim on the plan once you've continued paying your premiums, and your premiums don't increase. So your premiums do not increase even though we've paid out, and your plan doesn't end. Your plan goes up to age 76. Well, it could, depending on when you take it out, go up to as late as age 80.
Wow.
And so that has been JN's way of saying, let's try to bridge that gap, because there's that gap there. All right? So insurance, life insurance, can significantly help a person and a family. And of course, just the same way we're saying, go and do your checks early. Start early. We're saying start your protection early. Because again, the younger you are, the more affordable life insurance is.
Yes.
The premiums are much lower, and the good thing is that your premiums do not change. Your premiums remain level for the life of the policy.
And Dr. Friend, you mentioned that this is already in market.
It is in market.
It is ready for purchasing.
Persons have been purchasing. I have mine, and we have hundreds of persons who have already purchased this plan, and we have paid out claims on this plan.
Thank you so much
Which,
for
by the
sharing
way,
that.
I'll tell you, I'll go further to say this plan is also the only plan in Jamaica, critical illness plan, that has a 30-day waiting period.
Wow.
So once you have the plan for 30 days, then if you get diagnosed after that, you can.
It's mature. And for all of you who are listening, we invite you, of course, to take, take advantage of this very excellent and
Very
novel
good.
product that JN is offering. That's excellent. I didn't know that could even be a thing. So congratulations to Jamaica National for that. As we look to wrap up, we would like to offer, I understand that we're now live, our live stream is up. We will now just recap some of our main points of discussion thus far, and still offer 2 members of the viewing audience online to be able to win a free screening for breast cancer. And so just to share some information with you, I'd invite you to listen carefully in case the answer is the one I'm about to say. But according to the data presented thus far, the number of women diagnosed with breast cancer, it was in 974, right, and that was in
2018.
Okay.
Yes.
And according to the World Health Organization, that number is likely to increase to 1,000 by the year 2020, and it may further increase to approximately 1,300 women by the year 2040. Also of note to us in our Jamaican context is the fact that 60% of cases diagnosed in breast cancer are in women between the ages of 25 and 59 years old. And it's therefore important for us to be very mindful, to be vigilant, and to be up to date with our screening, and to continue as a country to reduce, Dr. Wright, the barriers, the prohibitive costs associated, and the psychological barriers as well to accessing screening. I'd like to invite all members of our panel to quickly give 1 or 2 sentences, make an expression to those who are listening as it relates to how it is that you can be in a better position to treat with breast cancer, or to support someone close by in your family or in your friend circle who may be battling breast cancer. What would you say from the heart to someone who's watching, who may be in that position? Let me start with Mrs. Gordon, who seems ready to go.
Well, certainly, what I'd like to leave with our viewers is that cancer does not discriminate, and we are all at risk for this disease. So let us be vigilant. Let us not be crippled to act by, allowing fear to overcome us. Let us seek information, accurate information,
Yes.
and let us get ourselves checked out. Let us not ignore the lifestyle adjustments that we need to make as a population, as our grandparents and our parents, have told us over and over. Prevention is better than cure.
Thank you so much for those wise words. Dr. Longmore, over to you.
And I will now take that prevention is better than cure a little bit further, as I said before, that preparation is the best prevention. And preparation of the mind, the body, and the spirit. It is critical that we recognize that more and more, this is not a battle that is going to be, I think we can soon start take it down from the big C to the little c. We're not there yet. But there are survivors, there are thrivers, and it is not a death sentence. Recognize that something might be wrong and address it.
Absolutely.
Don't be an ostrich with his head in the sand. Recognize it, take control of it, and know that you can come through that very dark tunnel to the light at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Dr. Longmore. Let me jump over to the other Longmore on our panel, Mrs. Longmore from JN.
Okay. The advice that I would give is, again, I think as a friend, when cancer happens, when you hear that your friend has cancer, what I encourage you to do is to draw closer to them. Don't stay away, and don't dominate the conversation with cancer, but talk about hope and talk about life, because it's almost sometimes like we think that cancer is catching, that it's somehow communicable, that it makes you different, and it does not. And we need support when we go through that. Yulet said that it doesn't discriminate, so it can happen to any one of us. And what we need when we're walking through that is acceptance, encouragement, spiritual help, and practical help. And that's what I encourage us to think about. Think outside of the box, because there are a lot of Jamaicans that don't have insurance coverage. There are a lot of Jamaicans that don't have pension coverage. There are a lot of Jamaicans who are in informal jobs, and they need practical help when they walk the road. So I encourage us to think more outside of the box as to how we can be of assistance.
Excellent and well said. Thank you so much, Mrs. Longmore. Let me pause here to ask the question now of our viewing audience to get the chance. Two persons will have the chance to win a free screening as it relates to detecting breast cancer if it is present. And the question for you to be mindful of is, according to the World Health Organization, how many women in Jamaica are predicted to be diagnosed with breast cancer in Jamaica by the year 2040? According to the World Health Organization, how many women in Jamaica are predicted to be diagnosed with breast cancer in Jamaica by the year 2040? If it is that you are watching, the first two persons to provide the correct answer on our JN Bank or JN Group Facebook or Twitter handles will receive a free breast cancer screening. And the Twitter handle is JN Bank Limited, and on Facebook it is JN Bank. So you can respond via those media and let us know if you are the lucky winner of the free screening. I will now continue with one of the males on the panel, Dr. Friend, to give us your final words of wisdom, guidance, perspective on this matter.
Sure. All right, I'll speak again to the financial part.
Yes, it's important.
And I'd like to say to those who are watching that make preparations. You are able to have critical illness insurance coverage, depending on your age, for prices sometimes less than 2 chicken patties per day.
Wow, good perspective.
Yes. And so the reality is that the sort of protection that you can receive is significant, and it is not something that should be considered exorbitant. And the difference that it will make is great. I'll say this too. For example, with our plan, let us say that you're one of the persons whom you were blessed or not blessed with the illness, yes? So you've lived to the time, to age 76, so the plan expires, and you never had to make a claim. We return every premium you paid in a lump sum, no expenses taken out, no costs. So at the end of the day, it would be equivalent to you saving, except you would not have had interest on it. So protect yourself, protect your family, protect your investments, protect your future.
Be forward thinking.
Be forward thinking.
Thank you so much, Dr. Friend. May I now ask Mrs. Carolyn Graham to give us her words of wisdom and guidance.
I agree with Judith in that breast cancer really is not a respect of age, race, or anything else, including gender, because there are also men who have breast cancer. But the important thing here really is early detection. Self-examination on a monthly basis for women, And if you feel anything, do something about it. Don't just sit with it. And if you find that there is something there, then we are here to support you. We have been there, we have done that, and we will walk with you straight through the valley, up the hill, and on the top of the mountain when all is well, we will be there with you.
Beautiful, because there is life after cancer.
There is life after
for so
breast
many
cancer.
persons. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Wright, let's hear from the wellness person among us.
Thank you so much. In summary, I would just like to, reiterate that the Ministry of Health and Wellness considers cancer prevention and care a priority. However, we need to work with individuals, families, communities, NGOs, banks. As you're aware, we have the National Health Insurance Plan that will be put at a green paper level, but Honorable Minister again invited other providers to join in providing insurance for health. And we are very happy to know that JN is leading the way in this area. Thank you, and we look forward to working with all our partners, and there are new community partners, support groups that are being formed as we speak. I know of a community group in the Western region currently that is working to assist persons with bus fare and with assistance with medication and putting them up overnight so that they can go to the hospital for care. So again, we can all work together to make this manageable and reduce the numbers for 2020
and beyond.
Beyond breast cancer.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
And to the oncologist on the panel, Dr. Williams, what are your words?
Yeah, so my thoughts really, I'm very passionate about changing the narrative on cancer in general in our country. I think we need to emphasize, first of all, that cancer, though it might not appear that way, is an entirely preventable disease. And the global trend is towards looking at cancer prevention now as a narrative that is being pushed. Similar, the same contributing factors or the same adjustments that can be made to prevent cancer, should you be diagnosed, can then be carried over into cancer treatment as well as cancer survivorship. So we need to start looking at this illness not as the Jamaica Cancer Society has reiterated. It's not one to be feared, but it is one to be acted upon, and it's also one to be prevented where possible. So I'd love to see further discussions. I must commend Jane Bank and the different stakeholders present here.
Absolutely.
This discussion is very fruitful, and we need to have more of these so that all the stakeholders can be represented and contribute to the table.
Well said. Thank you so much. If I may add my 2 cents to the discussion as well, I'm going to be vulnerable and share with our viewing audience some of the thoughts that ran through my head when I discovered a lump in my breast, and how some of those thoughts turned out to be irrational and not valuable to, in service of me. First of all, I felt a persistent itching in one breast, and one day when I was scratching, I felt a lump. And my first thoughts were, first of all, we can't manage this right now, because again, so many things going on. So wellness was not the urgent thing that it should have been. Secondly, my second thought was, I barely have breasts. I have small breasts, and therefore in my irrational mind, well, it's not likely to be that. The third thought was, there is nobody in my family who has ever battled breast cancer, and so I felt some sort of insurance policy, so to speak, as it relates to this not coming on my doorstep. Fourthly, one of my doctors, well thinking, expressed to me that, I don't think that this is breast cancer without any particular test being done. And so if I were not the kind of person I am to jump on Dr. Google, with my limited biochemistry background and do some reading of my own, I perhaps would have been lulled into a false and dangerous sense of security. Moving beyond that, I am very grateful that when I started working, a particular insurance agent was very persistent on knocking on my office door, and I did yield to purchasing one plan. And then about 9 months after he came back and said, Miss McQueenie, this plan don't cover this, take this other one. I'm like, Mister, why you don't stop stress me? But I bought 2 more policies. And in so doing, I was covered for multiple critical illnesses and life insurance as well. And if it were not for that decision, I don't know what would have been my outcome. And so for those of you who are watching, who may know nobody in your family who has breast cancer, and you may think, This could never come to me. It is not true, unfortunately. If you barely have breasts like myself, I'm a B cup, and you feel like, no, 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 this could never be a thing. That is not true, because if men can have breast cancer, then clearly we as women with small breasts are not immune. And also, in as much as we need to allow for the professionals to lead us, it is also important for everybody who is going through the journey to have a sense of the information that's available, what their ideal outcomes are, and do not be afraid to ask for a second opinion or to even change practitioners if you feel as though you're not getting the quality of care that you deserve. And for the supporters of those with breast cancer, I would like to say it's important to choose your words carefully and be sensitive. So allow persons to feel what they're feeling, and sometimes the best thing that you can do is to just be present, but be still and quiet. So on behalf of the JN Group, I wish to thank our guests here at the JN Financial Center for their insight, and to our online audience for your questions and your attention. We trust that you have found this conversation to be insightful, and we're asking you to look out for the next conversation by following JN Power of Pink, that hashtag on social media, and look out for our further think tank sessions as we look beyond breast cancer. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you to our guests as well.